Legend says that deep within the cursed lands, a dark tower rises from the ashes. A place where forbidden rituals twist the very essence of life and death. Today, we will bring that legend to the tabletop, crafting a Necromancer's Tower. It's a fast, affordable build filled with airy details and a gothic atmosphere. We will go step by step, so if you follow this tutorial, you will be able to make one yourself. No mystery, just cardboard, glue, foam and some creativity. Welcome back to HANDCRAFTED. Today we're building something dark and mysterious. A Necromancer's Tower rising high above the cursed land. We will be crafting it using simple materials, a cardboard tube and a cocoa container, perfect for the main structure. This build is relatively fast, affordable and full of character, so prepare your tools and let's find a cardboard tube. We will start by setting the Proxon guide to just a bit less than the width of our texture rollers. Next, we will cut a piece of foam long enough to cover the perimeter of the cardboard tube we just cut. Then, we will trim 1 or 2 mm to get rid of the outer edge that doesn't take texture as well. We always want the texture on freshly cut surfaces. Now we will use a texture roller with a brick pattern to create the effect we want on the piece. Press down firmly and roll slowly. Once the texture has been transferred, we will cut a sheet thin enough to bend without breaking. For me that's between 2 or 3 mm thick, but it will depend on the foam brand you're using. I made 3 sheets using these techniques. Now we will cut a much narrower strip but thicker. This will be used to alternate between the texture sheets. For these pieces, we will use the foil ball technique to imprint a simple stone pattern. Okay, let's start gluing. We will begin with one of the foam strips. Apply a bit of hot glue first and wait a few moments for it to cool down. Then continue applying glue in sections and attach carefully until you've gone all the way around. Finally, cut off the excess using a utility knife. We will use the same method to glue the brick pattern sheet, alternating it with the foam strips until the entire cardboard tube is covered. For the top section, I've textured some additional foam strips. But since I used a can with a metal base, I decided to prime it with a bit of spray paint first so the paint will adhere better later. Perfect, now we mark with the marker where we're going to place the strips and glue them on with hot glue. I eyeballed everything, but you can measure it if you want a more precise, evenly spaced result. Between these pillars, we will place small sections of brick patterned foam, and as you can see, a small part of the can remains visible. Don't worry, we will texture that later using filler. Now all that's left is to glue these tower sections to the one we already built using more hot glue, and the structure will be ready. Now that we have the basic structure ready, let's create a proper base for the tower. Time to craft a base. We will use a piece of 8 cm thick foam left over from when we made the magnetic dungeon walls. You can check out that video here. We will start by making the shape with a marker and roughly cutting it out using the Proxon. Next, I will mark exactly where the tower will go and where to place an access ramp. I made sure it's wide enough for a mini to fit comfortably. Once we know how everything will be laid out, we will cut out the entire section. Then we will draw a diagonal line and make a freehand cat. It took me quite a bit of effort to get the shape I wanted. I went over the cat several times and even salvaged some discarded pieces to glue them back later, but in the end I got a result I was happy with. Before gluing the ram, I mark its position, since we first need to texture the surface. We will do this by making a grid of shallow cuts and then using a metal roller to tear out chunks of foam. It's a pretty messy process, but the result is worth it. Now we can glue the ramp in place using hot glue. I glued on a few extra pieces, the ones I mentioned I had to recover, and I will refine the shape later with a bit of putty. Next we will bevel the entire base, and once that's done, we will texture the rest of the piece using the same technique we used for the inner part of the ramp. Make grid cuts, tear out chunks. This time I did it directly over the trash bin, and that turned out to be a great idea on my part. Now we're going to spray paint the lid of a cocoa can we use for the tower top part. Once it's primed, we will apply a bit of hot glue inside and place it in position. It's time to use filler to cover all the gaps left so far. This way we will hide the seams and achieve a seamless result. We will also add some texture to the visible areas of the upper section and a bit on the roof to break up the smooth surface of the plastic lid. If you're enjoying the build, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps keep these projects going. Now let's craft some additional pieces to give the upper section its own unique personality. Alright, we're moving from the workshop to the computer, and using Adobe Illustrator I'm going to design some trims for the top section. I want an evil looking aesthetic, and my main inspirations are Isengard and Barad-dûr. After a couple of tries I got the design I wanted. I also took the opportunity to make a few extra pieces. I can't really call this a full template, but for those of you supporting me on Patreon, you will have it available in case you want to use it. You will find the links in the description. Once the templates are printed on paper, it's time to cut them out with an X-Acto knife. Then I will transfer the design onto a foam board using a permanent marker. I decide to cut these pieces using a metal roller and a knife instead of the hot wire cutter. We will texture them with a foil ball and they will be ready to attach. For the connection, I drilled a small hole in the spot, inserted half a toothpick into the piece along with a generous blob of hot glue, and then positioned the piece, passing the toothpick through the hole to create a sturdy joint. Let's add some details. I've got these metal tags and we're going to use them for a bit of decoration. A small drop of hot glue is enough to hold them firmly in place. I roughly marked where I wanted to place them to keep the spacing consistent, and then patiently glued them one by one. Now for the door, I transferred the template onto a thin foam piece. I cut out the door with a knife, and although I initially wanted to make the frame as well, I realized I should have used a thicker piece. So instead, I carved the wood grain lines directly onto the door and then made the frame separately on a thicker foam piece. Using a ballpoint pen, I mark the individual stones that make up the frame and set it aside for later. Going back to the door, I used a bit of cardstock to add details. This time I used PVA glue, since I wanted enough working time to adjust the pieces. Hot glue dries too fast for that. I took the opportunity to texture and glue the frame to the door. It broke during the process, but nothing a drop of hot glue couldn't fix. Finally, with a bit more hot glue, I attached the door to its place. And now the tower is really starting to take shape. Alright, I've cut a few more pieces from the template I made, textured them again with the foil ball and glue them in place with a bit of hot glue. These pieces are smaller, so I didn't think it was necessary to use toothpicks for reinforcement. After removing the top section, sanding and priming with spray paint, I mark where I wanted to place these small Lego windows. Then I carefully cut out and remove the foam and leftover hot glue from the spot. Be cautious here not to damage the surrounding area, though if something goes wrong you can always fix it later with a bit of filler. I decided to prime with black before gluing the windows in, since I didn't want the brown cardboard tube to show through, and once the windows are attached, it will be impossible to paint behind them. Now a bit of hot glue, and we place them in position. I wanted to add more details and found some metal pieces. I glued one on, but didn't like it, so I tore it off. I also found this door ornament, but I think it will be better to wait until everything's painted before attaching it, since otherwise I wouldn't be able to reach the area underneath properly. So instead, I decided to add skulls, the perfect detail for a Necromancer's tower. I first pressed them in to make a small indentation, and then glue them one by one. I showed this technique in the demonic altar video, I will link it here. And there's also a follow-up with evil terrain elements, perfect for building a dungeon beneath this tower. Continuing with the details, I glued on these metal pieces with a bit of hot glue, bending them slightly so they fit the wall curve, and marking the center beforehand to keep the alignment right. If you're wondering where to get them, they are from AliExpress. If you have questions, ideas, or want to share your own builds, join our Discord community. You will find the link in the description. Now it's time to attach the tower to the base and add the final details before painting. Alright, let's get back to the base. I used the wood burning tool to create a recess where I could insert the tower. I left a bit of cardboard sticking out so I'd have some extra surface area for gluing. Though I did have to trim the door slightly because some hardened foam and hot glue were protruding. I applied a generous amount of glue and pressed the tower firmly into place. This is looking great. I think it's a good time to go over everything again with filler, especially anywhere the seams are too visible. I also use it to smooth out the ramp and hide any small mistakes or imperfections. We've made a lot of progress in this project, so I think it's time for a break. But before that, I want to cover the ramp and the top part of the base with PVA glue and sprinkle sand of different grain sizes to create a nice texture. We will let that dry for several hours before continuing, so for now I'm off to play some video games, and we will pick it up later. Remember the skulls I placed earlier? Well, I'm going to add more. Why? Because they look awesome, that's the reason enough. As always, start by making small indentations so the skulls sit better in place. Then glue them on with a drop of hot glue. To give the tower an even darker and more sinister look, I'm adding toothpicks around the base to serve as stakes. I broke them in half at an angle, so they have a sharp tip. Then place each one on top of a small hot glue droplet, adjusting it and adding more until I was satisfied with the amount. I want to take a moment to thank all the incredible folks who support me on Patreon. Your help is absolutely essential and really helps me covering the material costs for these projects. On top of that, having you on Discord, seeing your projects, getting feedback and getting to know you is truly priceless. Thank you all for being part of this. Let's bring this dark fortress to life with some eerie colors and weather textures. It's time to paint the Necromancer's tower. Finally, it's time to paint. As expected, we will start by priming everything with a couple of black coats. Remember, use acrylic paint mixed with a bit of PVA glue to help harden and seal the foam. For the base color of all the brick patterned areas, I'm going to use a very dark green. This will create some contrast with the parts that only have a stone texture. For the rocky wall of the base, we will do an overbrush with neutral grey, using our usual method for natural stone. Try to cover around 60 to 80% of the surface depending on how dark you want this section to look. Now we will apply an overbrush using the same dark green we used before, mixed 50-50 with neutral grey. With this color, we will paint the entire tower. Because we used a different base on the brick pattern sections, you will notice a subtle but nice variation compared to the smoother stone areas. Apply patiently using an old makeup brush, and make sure to remove the excess paint each time you load the brush. Next, we will use a dark brown as the base color for the ground area of the base, and also for the wooden door. Here comes what has been for me the most fun part of this project, the sponge technique. I really enjoyed using it in my previous Ruins and Frozen Terrain project. I will leave the video here for those who haven't seen it yet. We wet the sponge with green paint and remove almost all of it using a piece of cardboard. Now, very gently, we tap the sponge over the surface of the tower, placing special emphasis on the edges. We will try to do this unevenly to create interest and variation. Next, we will do the exact same thing with a lighter tone and even less paint to create the highlights. It's looking great! Now we will do an overbrush with a medium brown for the door. The brush strokes should go horizontally perpendicular to the wood grain. We will do the same for the ground surface, though here the stroke direction doesn't matter much, feel free to be chaotic if you want. For the highlights, we will use foam with the dry brush over the entire surface, and the same goes for the door. apply light pressure and make sure the brush has very little paint. Let's continue painting the details. I've mixed gunmetal with orange and will paint everything metallic. The upper details, windows, the front door accents and all the stakes and the rivets. We're going to create a bit of tone variation on the rocky wall of the base by applying washes. I already have this prepared and I have a short 2-minute video explaining how to make them. A bit of green, brown and dark red will be enough to give the rock more character. Once fully dry, we will apply a dry brush of pure white to highlight the edges and give depth to the texture. For the skulls, we'll simply use an overbrush of bone white. Use a small brush and paint patiently, trying not to get paint on the wall. After priming this metallic piece with spray, we paint it with an overbrush of green, the same tone used for the sponge paint job. Once dry, we use the other green tone for highlights, applying a dry brush to bring out all the piece edges. We will glue it in place with hot glue, finishing off the front door. And with that, our Necromancer tower is complete. Now it's time to set up a table, take photos and see how it turned out. And there it is, our Necromancer's tower, ready to stand tall among the cursed ruins of your tabletop world. By the way, I know I've been publishing far fewer videos than usual. For those who don't know, I started working on a Warhammer related project, making tutorials for a company that's building a social network specifically for wargames. I'm trying to make a living in the world of crafting, but honestly, it's incredibly difficult, and I'm still far from achieving it. However, I hope this project helps me move in that direction. Still, I try to find time to make tutorials and videos for this channel. I hope you will be patient and really enjoy the projects that are coming. If you like to support me, check out my Patreon for templates and behind the scenes content. And visit my itch.io page for free adventures and maps. Thank you so much for watching and I will see you in the next craft!